Dragged by the demon.
I think people forget just how massive Paranormal Activity was when it dropped and how big an impact on the industry it had. It not only revitalised the long dormant found footage genre along with Cloverfield and Wreck, spawning an absolute ton of new films shot with this technique alongside countless imitators, but it also made investors and producers see the potential in horror films to make mad profit. To put things into perspective, Paranormal Activity was shot on the tiny budget of only $15,000 across 7 days. It was shown off around festivals throughout 2007, but wasn't shown in theatres till 2009, after it was then improved in post-production by the studio that bought it at a cost of only $215,000. Every movie is different, but a basic rule of thumb is whatever your budget for production is, you usually spend a further 50% on marketing. For instance, a film that's $100 million, you would spend $50 million marketing it. So there's simply no way to know how much PA had spent on it, as 115 grand isn't realistic, and the figures haven't been released. However, what we do know is the film earned $193.4 million just at the box office. The Hollywood Reporter claimed its estimated net profit at $78 million. It's widely considered to be the most profitable film ever made in terms of box office revenue returns on expense. Sure, things like The Avengers Endgame technically made more, but that had $356 million plus marketing costs in order to make a blockbuster. It also had the advantage of being in the popular action-adventure genre and having a decade worth of build-up behind it. This was a fresh new series from unknown filmmakers in the low-grossing purely horror genre. It had an opening weekend of $77,873 and spawned a franchise that's almost made $1 billion cumulatively. The movie was actually nearly scrapped and remade by the production company, as during screenings, multiple people began walking out of the theatre. It was only after they discovered that people were leaving because the film was too scary that they decided to keep the original cut and send it out to theatres.
If it's not a ghost, what is it?
Horror films never got much of a budget before anyway, as the return on investment for scary films is pretty low. But this just showed you don't need famous actors, a fancy production, or even a big story to make a ton of cash. So many small indie horror films today directly take the approach that this film did. Unknown actors that don't require big salaries, camera work that only requires the actors to hold the camera themselves or just have it sit in a single position, and the minimal of post-production work to clean it up a bit. So, just how the hell was the film that successful? Well, for one, the marketing was genius. The trailer showed a screening of the movie the year before, where little of the film itself is shown, but instead we're given glimpses of the audience and the crowd reacting to how frightening the film was on night vision cameras. If you wanted to find out what was so damn terrifying, you had to go see the film. When you add on the fantastic critical response, good word of mouth, and being integrated into pop culture with a ton of parodies, it made it the must-see film. I'll admit, I bought into the hype. How could I not? I went to the cinema with my friends, sat through the film, and when we were leaving the theatre, my mate asked me what I thought of it. All I could say was, I don't know what film the people in those trailers were watching, but it sure as hell wasn't this garbage.
No, we're just gonna film, whatever happens to us, and then when any weird shit goes on, we will be in a perfect position to capture it for posterity.
Oh, so we can always, look back and remember fondly?
The film follows a young couple who move into a new home and begin to encounter some strange activity. That's really it. It's just them recording themselves as things get progressively worse. We get a small slice of backstory from Katie about how she was tormented by similar occurrences as a child, but not much else. The only other information we really get is from a psychic who visits and explains a little bit about the entity for us. To the film's credit, they actually do give an answer for why the hell they can't just move house, explaining the thing is attached to Katie and feeds off her negative energy. So the story is very thin and we'll have to rely on the characters to guide us through the narrative. The problem is, the couple are so damn unlikable that you really don't care what happens to them. Mika especially is a massive douche. He's insanely unsupportive towards Katie, refuses to ever listen to her despite her emotional distress, and constantly tries to get her to undress on camera despite her repeatedly saying she doesn't want to.
What an asshole!
I really didn't like the guy. And while you feel some sympathy for Katie and all this, she is mostly in a trance, screaming or moaning to Mika, so we only really see her in all these negative lights.
Told this was a good idea.
Wow.
You think you can get that ghost back?
Think I can do what?
Get the ghost back. Go some more interesting, you know?
I'm not interested in that. I just want them to go away.
It doesn't help that their acting is downright terrible, especially from Mika, that only made my hate for him grow stronger. There's the old adage that a film is like a magician's trick. Just as every movie is ultimately flawed, so too is a magician's trick. After all, it's just that, a trick, an illusion. Its purpose is to fool an audience into believing that real magic is being performed. A movie is creating the illusion that a film's world and characters exist and is really happening. The success of this trick being performed depends on how well these flaws are hidden by the magician or director through various techniques. For instance, one flaw in a film is that the people in the movie are not real, and are not really going through what the film portrays. How do you cover the flaw that they aren't really the characters? You hire an actor talented enough to convince an audience that they really are that character. Look at something like the Joker from The Dark Knight. No matter how many times I watch it, I never see Heath Ledger. He's so damn good in that movie that I only see the Joker, and I completely believe he's a real living person in that movie's universe. Mika and Katie just aren't good enough actors to convince me that they are really going through this. You can tell their interactions aren't sincere, so why should I become invested? And in a film that's really banking on this being a realistic piece of found footage, it's a massive issue.
Go, please.
Hey, chill out, all right? I'm trying to help the situation here. I have some ideas I want to talk to you
Okay,
about.
Mika, you and your stupid camera are the problem.
What the fuck?
Just leave me alone.
When they begin arguing, it's downright cringeworthy. There's one scene where Mika gets in a huff and he just makes this angry noise that instead of punctuating how stressed with the situation they were, just made me laugh. It actively ruins moments that had potential too. For instance, there's a scene where Katie gets out of bed, stares at Mika for hours, then walks out of the bedroom into darkness. Mika then wakes up and finds her in a daze, rocking back and forth on a chair in the garden. This had potential to be a really chilling scene and show how powerful the entity was becoming, but the execution is so limp that it butchers any chance of it becoming effective. The actress's performance just doesn't sell it enough for it to land. She ends up coming across like a moody toddler that doesn't want to go to bed more than she does a woman on the brink of possession by a demon.
Come on.
No, I don't want to go in. Just leave me
Are you okay, baby?
alone.
Come on.
No.
I wanted a horse, not a pony.
Aside from a few brief moments of promise in the last 3 minutes of the climax, the film just trudges along without anything interesting happening. You'll probably struggle to keep your mind from wandering because the film is shockingly dull. And with your investment being blocked by the other issues, it's a tough watch.
There's footsteps in, but there's no footsteps out.
Oh, God.
The best scene in the film is when Mika pours flour on the floor to track any ghost movements. When they wake up, they see a trail of footsteps heading up into the now open attic. I was genuinely on the edge of my seat as they slowly went up to the attic, and the tension was palpable. The camera slowly shifts up the ladder, looks over the empty loft, and then nothing. Absolutely nothing. The film goes right back to some boring back and forth between the leads without any payoff. What a fucking tease. It builds you up just to leave you to slowly drain off the energy you built up. It's like cinematic blue balls, and the film does it a lot. This shows the film had promise. If it had better actors and a director, it could have worked. But instead, it's just an exercise in frustration. Do you find noises like this frightening? Then welcome to your own personal hell. Cause that's what 90% of this film is. Creaking doors and indeterminate banging elsewhere in the house.
Did you hear that? It was like a.
Not once did any of the few jump scares catch me off guard, and then as I said before, the parts that were decent left you hanging waiting on an exclamation. Paranormal Activity comes across more as a student film I would have made back in college than a fully fledged cinematic release. Honestly, you'd probably have a better time binging an hour and 20 minutes of people sharing their own paranormal experiences on YouTube. Look at something like St. Mungo or Blair Witch, which fully embrace everything being as authentic as possible. Every inch of those films are done to make them believable and leave a lasting impression. If you watched Lake Mungo without the knowledge it was a faux documentary, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was a legit one because every aspect of it feels and looks so real. Blair Witch Project 2 contains a lot of very intricate, subtle storytelling that rewards viewers that pay close attention. There isn't a single moment of Paranormal Activity that once feels believable. It's my personal picture for the most overrated film of all time. I really don't understand what people see in it, as every aspect beyond the sound design is fundamentally flawed and unconvincing. I can really only recommend it for people curious to see what all the fuss was about, but to be honest, you'll probably just be disappointed and end up saying, that's it? I actually thought this was one of the most tedious times I'd ever spent watching a movie. And then the sequel came out. Paranormal Activity 2 was released a year later in 2010, starting the tradition for the series to come out every year on Halloween, effectively replacing the Saw franchise that had done this for 7 years prior.
We've got to have money.
In fact, they were initially going to get Kevin Gutterer, who's the editor in all the Saw films and the director of the sixth, but Lionsgate refused to let him out of his contract with the final Saw film, so they quickly brought on Todd Williams, who had some prior experience. People knew the score now, so the same marketing gimmick wouldn't work. Instead, trailers were kept short and to the point, simply teasing a bunch of vaguely scary imagery without any plot. It did the job, and surprisingly got banned from a bunch of cinemas in Texas for being too scary. So they got a bigger budget, a more seasoned director, and actors with something worthwhile on their CV. They've learned what worked and what didn't from the first, so this should be a massive improvement, right? Well...
Well, if you come in, it'll be the best bath I've ever
So quiet, and like there's nobody here. It's fantastic.
I love Martine, but I'm kind of loving the fact that she's not here. What time is your sister coming?
So the second film is actually a prequel to the first that focuses on Katie's sister and her own family, comprising of her husband, teenage daughter, and baby son Hunter. We get cameos of Katie and Mika, but luckily they're brief and they don't argue at any points. The family get burgled and a necklace that Katie gave her sister gets stolen, and their housekeeper is fired after sensing something demonic and trying to cleanse the house. Other than that, it's pretty much the same plot. Christy states her and Katie experienced the same sort of thing when they were kids, and then the film is just a series of scary sequences like the first one. The only thing I took from it is that because this film and the first eventually take place at the same time, it must mean that there's two separate entities attacking both the sisters, or it's the same one doing it with more power than we thought, which I found at least a little intriguing. In the second half of the film, because the first half of this film moves as swiftly as molasses on flat concrete.
It's like 2 months, alright?
Muchas gracias. Pero lo que usted no me entiende es que en esta casa
Me entiende.
nadie está a salvo,
Yo no
especialmente
creo, Martín,
David.
okay? I told you. Okay?
¿Sí?
No creemos.
Todo lo que ha pasado aquí en su casa.
The family are likeable and decent actors this time, but they're bland and indistinct characters. They're just kinda generic nice without anything to clue us into what they're all about. Their daughter has a boyfriend and laughs at a bad joke. That's literally all I got from the film about her. They're basically props, just there to be scared for our amusement. Beyond the typical random noises in the house that couldn't scare a child in the dark, it takes 36 minutes for something suspect to go down, and it's a pool cleaner shimmying out of a pool. It just looks like it got caught on the edge of the pool and scooted out, but the mother gets so worried over something so trivial. She then sees a pot fall off a hook in the kitchen twice. That's all it takes for her to go over the edge. A pool cleaner lifting out of a pool and a pot falling in the kitchen. The dad rightfully has a reasonable explanation for both of these things happening, but Christy instantly jumps to the fact it's a ghost. Her worries seem so overblown and forced that she ends up becoming rather annoying. Obviously, it is a real ghost, but it takes an agonizing 45 minutes for the first true sign of paranormal activity to occur. Because the family is so dull and the attempts to intimidate the audience or set in an atmosphere are so poor, the film feels far longer than it really is. I swear, this is the exact time the first proper scare of the movie happens. Two-thirds through the movie and the film finally delivers. And it's a great scare. I was thinking, oh boy, here we go, things are ramping up, I'm ready for a thrilling climax. But you will be shocked how damn quickly the film loses all momentum. The scare is good, but again can't stick the landing and simply passes by. You're so numb to anything being so brain dead by how boring everything is that its attempts to be creepy don't have any impact. It's the same issue the first film had, where it has some decent build-ups but sloppy payoffs. Only here, the suspense is arguably even less effective. They play this sequence of the house at night like 8 times. 8 times! And nothing paranormal ever happens. Even in the third act, when we do get some big moments and some damn good special effects, the movie constantly cuts away. Whenever it feels like something is about to go down, the film will suddenly switch to everything being just fine again. Remember in Godzilla how the first part of the film was too many series of Godzilla showing up, and then the film just cutting away to the boring human characters? It's just like that. But at least Godzilla made up for it by giving us an awesome third act. Here, they tried to do something in the last 20 minutes. It's maddening, as you finally think the film is starting to get interesting, only for it to hit a wall every few minutes.
Don't touch him!
Oh, come on!
It's especially egregious when after a massive sequence when the literal house shakes, the film has a time skip and everyone is doing just fine and drinking by the pool. What? Did they just forget the mentally scarring situation they'd all just been through? The movie suitably goes out with a complete wet fart of an ending, limping to the credits without much fanfare. I first watched this upon release with my brother, and the experience was so uneventful that we ended up just mostly making fun of it and egging the film on to do something. When it was over, we were more relieved than anything, and barely shared our thoughts on what we just witnessed. There isn't even anything narrative-wise that happens to further the story, beyond the baby Hunter being reported as missing through text at the end. Paranormal Activity 2, it's just a copy of the first one, with a bigger budget and less scares. I really don't know which is worse, because the first one in my opinion is a badly executed boring mess, while the sequel is a better production, but takes far longer to get going and suffers its own problems. But it still made a ton of money, and so a sequel was inevitable.
But wait, there's more!
However, would you believe there's actually 2 separate Paranormal Activity 2s? That's right, there's actually a Japanese Paranormal Activity 2 titled Tokyo Nights that was made independently by little-known director Toshikazu Nage. It's a full-blown sequel that ties into the first film, but as we'll come to see, is decidedly non-canon. There's just too much stuff that conflicts with what the American sequels would go on to explore. I have to at least say something about it, but considering it isn't canon, I'm only going to spend a minute discussing it here. It involves a brother whose sister is in a wheelchair due to a car accident she had in America. Of course, it was Katie that caused the accident, and the ghost following her decides to go to Japan to stalk and torment this poor girl instead. To its credit, the film has a better setup, but is basically a retread of the original, and there's no reason to seek it out for being a hidden gem or anything. Honestly, I don't get why it wasn't just a Japanese remake. It didn't need to be a sequel at all.
Okay, I think it's on. So how you play is you say Bloody Mary 3 times into the mirror, and then her dead body's supposed to appear in the mirror and try to kill you. Stop, Katie.
Third time's the charm? Well, I had absolutely no interest in the series after the first 2 melted my brain through sheer tedium. However, I was in the cinema and happened to sit through the trailer. Holy shit, you see the entity? Up until now, we'd never actually seen or really learned anything about the Violent Spectre in these movies, but this gave me hope it would delve more into it. The trailer also just looked much better, with some good scares being set in the 80s and some actual storyline to grab onto. The reviews were also more in line for what we'd normally see for a horror. Against my better judgment, I went to see it. And would you believe it's actually good? This film is set in the 80s and follows Katie and Chrissy as children with their stepfather. Katie befriends an invisible entity named Toby, and then the usual hijinks ensue. In Free, the characters are much better realised and more likeable, the kid actresses especially. There's a ton of small moments between the parents to make us believe in their relationship. For instance, they have wee private jokes and discuss weed, etc. It all adds up for us to engage with them more and become more sympathetic when they eventually get put through hell. There is a scene where they're filming a sex tape, but it comes across more endearing because of how awkward they are, and we see the actors really have fun with it.
Slow down, baby.
They have great chemistry, and I believed both in their characters and relationship more because of it. They also have genuine conflicts like a real family would. They aren't just a happy middle class family. They have money to think about. Their relationships and their approach to the youngest daughter having an imaginary friend is very believable. They also approach the Paranormal Activity much better this time. They don't jump to wild conclusions or call a priest to bless the house because they heard a thud in the ceiling. The main guy just has a passing interest in the stuff that's happening and he analyses it with a friend. It's very natural.
So Chrissy, what was the last thing that Toby said to you?
Like...
Anything?
Yeah.
No.
Secrets.
Secrets, regular stuff?
Giving the entity a name and having it converse with the youngest daughter, albeit silently, gives it a ton more personality. We see how this thing operates more, and though it doesn't give us all the answers, we discover it does have a plan in place. It also ups the stakes. We obviously know this thing is bad news, but the child is innocent and we want to warn her of what's to come, but instead have to watch her slowly get manipulated for the worst. It's also a far more active spectre this time round, showing how powerful it can be by moving big objects and people. The demon in this film is Old Testament, he doesn't fuck around.
I need to show you something.
All you do. You don't even spend.
The scares aren't as good as the ones in the trailer, but to be fair, they are implemented much more believably. Really, how would this scene with the dark figure in the mirror end? Plus, there's still a ton of intense moments, especially near the end where things get really wild. And it doesn't just pack all the good stuff into the third act. The pacing is much improved, and it doesn't take forever to give us what we came for. We're introduced to the characters, and then within about 10 minutes we're hit with some supernatural chills. And it's great. Dust falls from the ceiling and we see the outline of the entity. The first big spook, and it's far more creative than anything in the first two. The bangs and creaks around the house aren't used as much, and overall it's just a far more hot-blooded movie with a much smoother build-up to the big moments in the finale. One intriguing technique used is having the camera on a fan. It will slowly creep to the left and right very slowly, and it's highly effective. It not only gives us suspense as we await nervously what slowly comes into view, but it also means when something is different, it takes a few moments to work out what's happened. And that's when it gets you. Overall, the whole movie is just shot far better than the previous two. There's no long sequences of the house just sitting quiet with nothing happening or anything like that this time round. By the end, the film raised questions I actually wanted answers, and gave me moments to latch onto and analyse. What actually is Toby? Why does he want these girls? Who the fuck are the coven of witches that seem to be running the show? It stunned me. Actual plot development. The film's nothing unmissable, but compared to the first two, it's a goddamn masterpiece. It's well paced, scary, and now had some genuinely intriguing lore to follow and discuss over. I was actually pretty psyched to see the next one.
Can you tell me who you were talking to? What was that? Robbie, what was that?
Paranormal Activity 4 is the entry you probably remember as the one with the Microsoft Kinect in it. I remember so many people rolling their eyes and screaming sellout, but it's actually not as big a marketing gimmick as you'd think. Real ghost hunters use tech like this to hunt ghosts. The whole thing about this sort of kit is it identifies a person and arranges a virtual skeleton for them to track. And it makes sense the family would have a Kinect because there's kids. So I wasn't put off by this. If anything, it would only lend itself to some good creepy moments. The movie had a lot going for it. It was riding high on how well Paranormal Activity 3 did, had the same directors coming back, and the trailers looked pretty promising, showing off unique setups and some sweet new ghost powers being utilised.
There's just shit everywhere. What the? Wow, dude! Alex, there's a boy in your castle.
He's the kid from across the street.
What are you doing here, man?
You okay?
Here we encounter a family whose neighbour falls ill, and while she's in the hospital recovering, they look after her son Robbie. However, as expected, Robbie has some strong ties with the paranormal underground and the usual hijinks erupt. We learn that Katie is the mother, and at first it seems obvious that this was Hunter, the boy that was stolen at the end of 2, being prepped for years and now ready to help out with the Coven's plans. But instead, we learn that Wyatt, the adopted son of this family, is actually Hunter, and Robbie is a whole new character.
What?
Robbie's creation is just puzzling. Why do they need this second child years after Hunter's abduction to do this covert operation to prep him for their plans? Couldn't they do it themselves? Or hell, just let him grow up with Katie's sister's family till the time was right? The best I can think of is that Robbie isn't real. He's some form of ghost, or just a possessed vessel to help Toby travel around. But Toby didn't need this before, and considering where the series' narrative goes after this, makes almost no sense. So, why'd she steal Hunter just to give him up to a random family? No clue. If Hunter was missing, you'd think they'd be on the lookout for children at adoption centres. This is one of the worst aspects of the franchise. It never had a firm and structured story or goal, and they seem to have just made it up as they went along. It causes so many elements that were set up to clash horrifically with the new things they want to explore going forward.
This?
Yeah. What is that? What is that?
What is that?
Yes.
It looks like a triangle with a circle in the middle.
No shit. Right there.
That? Looks like scribbles on his back.
No, it's not scribbles on his back. It's the same symbol.
All round in 4, we take a giant step backwards, with the characters being really dislikable, especially the guy in it. His comedic relief gets real tiresome after about 5 minutes of his shtick. The main girl is back to just being a bland, nice protagonist, and the wee boy that plays Wyatt is so lifeless and dull that he could probably be replaced with a mannequin that had a voice box strapped to it. The mum and dad are in the film so little that I barely remembered them being there until they were suddenly front and centre. It's also detrimental that after the halfway mark, there's very little dialogue, meaning all the character development in terms of getting to know these people is crammed into that first act. The scares are very predictable this time round, and it's back to the issue of that we have no real connection to these characters, so you don't care what happens to them. Even the Xbox Kinect scenes, which were so hyped up, end up being a very small part of the experience, and really only one scene utilises it well. The climax isn't interesting because the film around it is so bad. I wasn't invested in anything, and the stakes are so low. We know that Katie needs Wyatt, so he's in no trouble, and everyone else barely scrapes by as a character. It's a dull, plodding affair, and the only interesting thing I got from everything is a hint that a virgin sacrifice is needed in order for a host to be possessed by a demon. Which is yet another hypocrisy, because Katie and her sister seem to be pretty possessed without any virgins around. The movie also comes to a really abrupt end. After the usual ghostly antics and camera shaking, the film just cuts to credits out of nowhere, and it's not satisfying in the slightest. It rivals films like The Devil Inside, where just as the film begins ramping up, it slaps the credits in your face. The only thing you take away from the climax is how massive the Coven truly is. It's an unsettling image, but there's so much terrible beforehand that I had no real interest. It seemed Paranormal Activity 3 was simply a fluke. The very next sequel with the same people working on it suddenly became arguably the worst in the franchise. The characters are forgettable, the plot makes no sense and is riddled with holes, and it doesn't build upon anything the previous film put forward. But the series would suck me in again the very next entry.
Archie, what are you doing? What? What the fuck? Shit! What the fuck? Do it again! Do it, guys!
Check this shit out.
Go. Oh shit! Fucking shit!
The marked ones intrigued me for one reason. It wasn't set in a suburban house. We've had basically boring, mostly white families in their stock white-walled houses so far, so this seemed like an opportunity to inject some freshness into the franchise that was desperately needed. This is essentially the same as when a sitcom has a holiday episode. It's Paranormal Activity abroad! Well, not exactly, it's still set in California, just located in the Latino part of it. It follows Jesse and his friends who decide to check out their creepy neighbour who's rumoured to be a witch, as well as do some of their own little rituals just for fun. In typical horror movie fashion, all of it comes back to bite them in the ass as our good friend Toby stomps onto the scene. The setup is surprisingly the most natural feeling of all the films. It does take a while for the truly scary stuff to start, but it's helped because of two things. One, the characters are likeable people that interact well off one another. And two, there's a constant flow of information to the audience that keeps your interest. The characters are no longer bland or uninteresting. These are teenagers, just having fun and hanging out. I found the film to actually have a good sense of humour that makes the group's descent into darkness all the better.
3. Oh, shit! What the fuck? Gotta breathe in and breathe out. What? That's insane, Jesse! Oh, shit!
In a great twist, the characters don't freak out that there might be a ghost, they see it as something fun. The ghost plays Simon with them. They find the weird rituals going on in the neighbour's house to be hilarious. And when one gets possessed, it's not initially apparent that it's by a demon. They have a lot of fun with the ghost powers it gives them, fighting off bullies, and even utilising the ability to float to have a giggle. It makes for a really entertaining film, as it doesn't fall into the cliches of the genre and we aren't just watching folk being startled for 100 minutes.
What? Nothing, sorry, I just startled myself.
One thing that stands out is the audio. Listen to some of the scenes in the second half of the film through headphones, and it is terrifying. A scene with Toby stalking them in a basement genuinely had me sitting stressed on the edge of the couch, and it was mostly down to how goddamn intense the sound design was, along with the raised stakes. That light-hearted opening half allows the second half of the film to really hit hard as it truly gets evil. It ratchets up in suspense and creepy scenes until one hell of a finale that has a group of Latino gang members squaring off in a shootout with the Covenant Witches, mowing them down with a shotgun. People don't like this? Why? It's awesome! The whole climax reminds me of Blair Witch. It's just a crazy extreme roller coaster of things spiraling downward with creepy imagery, frightening scares, and questions being raised that will instantly have you reaching to the internet to hear about people's theories. The movie didn't make a big splash at the box office and got fairly bad reviews, but I honestly don't know why. In my opinion, it's the best film in the franchise. I think people were just burnt out with the series by this point, but if you go back, I think you'll be surprised how well it holds up. Again, it's not amazing, but by the standards of this series, it's like watching Jaws after first trudging through its terrible sequels. The change in direction for the franchise opens up so many opportunities going forward. We could go to Iceland for some Icelandic witchcraft that conjures up a ghost, the Bayou for some voodoo shenanigans, or somewhere in Asia to see what craziness Toby can get up to there. Again! Once more, I was invested. I couldn't wait to see what new ventures lied ahead now the series wasn't bound to its setting and story from the first two. Paranormal Activity 5 is set in a white middle-class suburban family's home. All the momentum and fun from the previous entry instantly sucked away just from the setup alone. It's mind-boggling that they went for such a piss-poor backward step. I understand we're going to have to get back to Katie, Toby and the Coven, but why follow yet another stereotypical family who happen to have a fetish for filming their every move? I completely forgot the Ghost Dimension came out. It came and went with all the fanfare of a fart in a jacuzzi and got absolutely torn apart by fans and critics. And rightly so. It was simply another horror movie that came and went that year. And despite being billed as the final chapter in a long-running series, there wasn't much excitement. If anything, there was more relief that audiences wouldn't have to put up with these films each year anymore. It seems the Ghost Dimension is also a name for the third dimension, as, yes, this was unnecessarily released in 3D.
Did you hear that? Wait, is she talking backwards? Is she saying Bloody Mary?
What's Bloody Mary?
It's a game. It's a game kids play.
This one follows a family who discover a cache of videos in their house that belongs to Katie and Christy, showing them as wee girls again and even including Hunter 12 years before he was due to be born. They decide to investigate, and the littlest ghost demon pal crashes the party yet again. I'm not even going to talk about the characters, they matter so little. None of them are three-dimensional. It's just another bland buffet for Toby to make startle and squeal for 90 minutes. The actors are also terrible this time out. I never once felt I was watching real people. Their wooden delivery combined with the poor direction makes it a real struggle to sit through. It takes an absurd amount of time before we see anything remotely paranormal. There's so much exposition this time round as we see the two guys study and find out about all the things we the audience already know. The film also does a cheap camera effect that is just sort of there. It's of course meant to show how this camera picks up ghosts, but it has no real value beyond being annoying. It is interesting that we're able to see the demon in full this time round, but the special effects look like premium fecal matter. It's like something a student learning to use Adobe After Effects would mock up in a week to showcase on their YouTube channel. It's just floating black threads that do nothing but hover there. Is this shit supposed to be scary or threatening? Since the film was in 3D, the effects also jump forward and let you take in the PlayStation 2 grade texture work in all its glory. One of the most glaring omissions? Where the fuck is Jesse? We saw he was completely possessed, just like Kay had become, and yet he's nowhere to be seen in the film. Pretty much everything is ignored from the marked ones.
Fuck me, right?
Toby has become a complete joke. There's no rules to him anymore. He can do whatever he likes and be whatever he chooses to appear like. Why does he even need anyone else? He comes across close to a god. He's able to kill people as a ghost and as a solid swirling black ooze. It completely sucks any intriguing elements out of him because he's so inconsistent. Look at Superman's biggest criticism, that he's too powerful with a load of bullshit powers, so each incarnation has to give him limits and ground him in some way. Toby has no weaknesses, seemingly no limit to his power, and it makes the whole affair super frustrating as a result.
Oh god.
I can't imagine being a fan of this series. It's basically a 90-minute middle finger to people invested in anything. The Coven? Never explained. Toby? A confused mess, and we still don't get to see what he really looks like. Time travel? It has almost zero purpose narratively. The Ghost Dimension's entrance looks pretty cool. Why couldn't we have gone in with the kid? Spice things up a little and be treated to some twisted, unique visuals in Toby's world. Would have been vastly more entertaining and interesting than waiting by the door.
Let me in! Let me in!
The answers it gives are half-baked or just raise further questions. What are Toby's motivations? His grand plan? What the fuck actually is he? What the hell do the midwives get out of bringing him back? I could go on and on. And I will! What the fuck was the point in time travel? Wouldn't that have just made this plan easier to pull off? Why does the ritual require multiple children across decades of time? Is the virgin sacrifice thing required, or just speculation? Why the fuck did Toby and the Coven take a holiday to Latin America that never comes back? Why does Toby becoming human mean anything? He seems to be doing pretty alright as a ghost god. Surely it's worse cause now he's mortal. If he is human, I don't know, the most we see are his slimy calves. Was that the whole franchise's main goal? To depict a ghost demon becoming a real boy?
I'm real. I'm a real boy!
That is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more problems with the series that I could rant about, but I'm tired of it all. Ghost Dimension is terrible. It's confusing, boring, and offers no satisfying answers for anything the series previously raised. Add in the bad direction and weak special effects, and it only makes it ugly as well as poorly written. It feels like the series had finally come full circle and devolved into the DVD bargain bin knockoffs that the franchise had spawned back in 2009. The Paranormal Activity franchise is a roller coaster, some ups and a lot of downs. And it ain't over yet! Despite Ghost Dimension supposedly being the last one, the franchise does a final Friday and there's a brand new bona fide sequel scheduled to come out in 2022. Who knows, maybe the 7-year break allowed them to work out the series' issues, take time to fully develop a story with interesting characters, and return with a fire to blow us all away. Oh.
Okay, easy man.
Don't try to stop this. Jacob, just put the gun down.
Her body is the only thing that can hold the demon. If you set him free, he'll be able to possess anyone.
I'll keep it brief. I've only seen Next of Kin once purely for this video, and yeah, it's bad. It comes across as a soft reboot, but the only vaguely interesting thing it proposes is the origins of Toby that's been in the main character Sarah for decades, which adds yet more ludicrous plot elements regarding time travel in this franchise. It's a fucking mess, and it's clear they're still making shit up as they go along without anyone fact-checking the lore. Honestly, I could just repeat what I said for the last entry. Next of Kin's plot only messes up the incoherent narrative further, it's not tense or creepy, and aside from a nice visual every so often, offers nothing fresh or exciting to the franchise. As for the Paranormal Activity series, now I've done this video, I can tell you, I have absolutely zero plans to ever watch it again. They're tepid, unsatisfying experiences that started out as an overhyped substandard horror flick and fizzled out into flat-out trash. A surprise hit that spawned a franchise that had no clue what to do with itself going forward with each entry. If you're desperately looking for a decent found footage flick, then watch the marked ones, or even number 3. But other than that, the only activity you'll find here is your brain wasting away watching this boring as fuck franchise.